Northlight Energy Solar Proposal and Pilot Request. This is also slated for a public hearing. I think we have at your desk a motion to authorize the pilot option lease agreements for parcels 187-5 and 152-7. Before we read the motion, or perhaps let's read the motion first and then have the director speak. Who would like to read the motion? Councilor Kier.
Motion to authorize pilot option lease agreements for parcels 187-5 and 152-7. The Claremont City Council, pursuant to RSA 72:74, and after a public hearing duly noticed, approves the proposed payment in lieu of tax pilot agreement between the city and Northlight Energy Steel Mill Solar LLC for a solar facility within a minimum of approximately 60 acres to a maximum of approximately 90 acres of city-owned land located off River Road and Grissom Lane, parcels 187-5 and 152-7, the property. This pilot is negotiated with additional terms as consideration, including an option agreement, multi-year lease agreement, and one-time $175,000 economic development fund, the fund. The City Council authorizes the city manager or his designees to take all such actions as may be necessary to execute said option, lease, fund, and pilot agreements and implement this motion in accordance with the state law and regulation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion was read by Councilor Kier, seconded by Assistant Mayor Dameron. Director Merrill, would you like to review this?
Yes, I'm not sure. We reviewed some of the terms at the last meeting. I'm not certain to the extent you want to go through this again. I did summarize it for you in the memo. The city assessor is here if there are questions for him, and Aaron Svedlow is here if there are questions for him. And I guess let me know how much information you would like me to discuss here. I think the thing that's most important to us to put into the record here is that under RSA 7274, other renewable projects that are equivalent can come in and request the same pilots. So it was very important for us in this motion to make it clear that this pilot agreement is undertaken in large part as a part of one-time $175,000 payment as well as lease payments. So it's a package.
Okay.
I believe that I sent to you, and I forgot to bring my own copy of the estimated annual revenue for the city. It's approximately $160,000 a year between the lease and the pilot that would go to the city. And the CDA will enter into the same agreement independent of you for their one lot. And I think that's approximately $40,000 that would go to them that they could then reinvest in the city. So that's what's proposed.
Separate from the 160.
Correct. Yeah.
And over the lifetime of this 20-year project, the revenue, the accumulated revenue would be, it's over $3 million.
Over $3 million, yeah.
So everybody should have gotten that spreadsheet, the council, members of the council?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Director Merrill? Or we have, Aaron is your first name.
Aaron.
I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name. Would you like to stand up at the podium in case there are questions, or?
Sure.
Either, because we have a public hearing as well.
Yeah.
Councilor Canister?
This might be more for Mrs. Merrill. Just curious about the land itself. I know you talked about it a little bit, how it wasn't really suitable for development. Can you give me a little history on the land? Why does the city own it? Was there plans to do something different with it at one time? Do you know much about it?
The city has, it's been a portion of it. I think it's 187.5. Yeah, 187.5 was part of the original Wheelabrator lot. And it was subdivided off. It is large. It's a large wetland area, by and large. It does not have a lot of development potential. And the lots up behind there have the I said Eversource easement, and Alan Chamberlain corrected me. It's National Grid. But anyway, you have Green Mountain Power going across these parcels on one end, National Grid going through the middle. And there are some topography as well as some wetland issues in all of the 3 lots. So it's not high-value land. It's also not highly visible land.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? I know you said this, what is your last name? I'm
Svedlow.
Svedlow. Svedlow, okay. I know you, Mr. Svedlow, I know you talked about this before, but I think it's important when people are watching at home, if they missed the last meeting, talk about how you're going through this design. It won't inhibit wildlife or some benefits to this topsoil.
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you again for having me tonight. So we're obviously in the preliminary stages of designing the project. We see this as the first step. We'll be going through the planning board and the Department of Environmental Services here at the state of New Hampshire. The project will be designed to avoid direct impacts to wetlands, so we will not build in wetlands. We will be putting what's called a wildlife-friendly fence around the facility. So this is a fence that was sort of first used in Vermont, and actually the Vermont A&R loves it. It's got a gap at the bottom to allow small critters to get through. It's not tall enough to prevent deer from jumping over, but it meets our code requirements of National Electric Code for the project. Also, one of the advantages of solar, especially for land that's been sort of used and abused in terms of forestry activity, is we let the soils stay fallow for a period of years. Then after the project's done, it can return to agriculture or silviculture or forestry if need be. And in addition, we do a full stormwater design for the project. So the project will essentially act as a meadow for stormwater purposes, and there'll be sediment basins and traps, et cetera, for the facility.
Councilor Kier?
So I really appreciated the PowerPoint that was added to our packet. I really liked that because I really liked how that, one of the reasons that you chose Claremont was the master plan vision for pro-renewables, which I thought was really great. And I also like the idea of kind of utilizing land that probably wouldn't otherwise be utilized. And it's, from what I'm hearing and from the research I've done, it'll be left in better condition than maybe what it is now for other uses. So I think this is very exciting.
And could you speak briefly about the decommissioning of it? That was a concern we got.
Sure. Yeah, so this is truly a temporary use of the land. The project will need to be decommissioned after its useful life. We will remove the facility. That is a clause in the lease agreement with the city, same lease agreement with the CDA, and my expectation is that would be part of the planning board approval process as well, the site plan approval process.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Svedlow? All right, I'll open it up for a public hearing. Would anybody from the public like to speak on this issue? Yes, Representative Stapleton.
Walt Stapleton, Ward 3, also New Hampshire House Rep Ward 3, Sullivan County District 5. Basically, I like the idea of having power generation in our community, but I have a couple of questions, and one of the questions was how long a period of use is forecast for this facility before decommission. And the second question would be, if this power generated, how much power is generated? And third question, is the power generated on a wholesale basis right to the grid? And do we have any benefit in case of line or power disruption for this to feed our local system for local need? If the representative could answer those questions, that would be helpful.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Let me start with the last one first, and then I'll go through the rest of them. The facility as currently designed would not have what they call black start capabilities. If we were to add a battery at some point in the future, that would allow us to have what's called black start capabilities. Black start means basically everything goes down everywhere, and you're able to isolate a section of the grid and operate without external power sources. That's not terribly common for utility scale solar projects, but it is something we could consider in the future as the price of batteries declines. I think the second question was about wholesale power sales and where the power is going. So the project has a long-term 20-year contract with Eversource and another utility. We have talked about, and we will have future conversations about whether or not an additional small expansion of the project could be made in the future to accommodate potentially the city of Claremont's needs. So that's something we've talked about. I think that would be sort of the next step after this lease is approved, to have that kind of conversation. And forgive me, the first question was about the duration of the facility, is that correct?
The use duration.
Yep.
Before decommission.
Absolutely. So we will operate for a minimum of 20 years, typically 25. We expect the facility to be functional and economical, potentially up to 30, 35 years. There is the possibility of resurfacing the facility at that point and trying to go a little bit longer. We would likely have to come back to the city to renew the permit. And I think we've contemplated a lease duration in the 40-year range. Solar panels typically last between 25 and 30 years. Currently designed. Yes, sir.
Other questions from the public? Mr. Contois?
Jim Contois, Ward 2. The first question I have is, have we considered building a facility ourselves? Can the city build a facility? And the reason I ask that is just doing a little bit of research online. These facilities typically generate anywhere from $21,000 to $42,000 per acre. We're getting $1,000, and with this pilot, it looks like, I think Nancy said, $3 million. There's serious money to be made here. And I'm afraid of these long-term agreements. This is a 20-year agreement, and it's like they come to us and say, this is a 20-year agreement because we've got a 20-year agreement with others, so it's a take it or leave it. And I don't like take it or leave it situations for our city. So it's like, I don't understand this negotiation process. Are we negotiating this? Are we negotiating the $1,000 an acre for more money? It just seems like we're giving away our land that we own too cheap. And I didn't know, I don't know how this whole process works, but can the city build their own facility? Because for a long time, we've been hurting. And we just keep asking, what can we do to bring in industry? What can we do to make money? What can we do to relieve the tax burden for the citizens here? So those are just some of the questions I have. It's just that it just sounds like we're giving it away for too long, too cheaply. Thank you.
Would either Director Merrill or Mr. Svedlow like to respond to that?
I can respond a little bit. We received a request by a private developer for use of city land, and so we're responding to that private developer for city land. The city owns other land, and I think that we most certainly in the future can look at energy projects that are maybe affordable. At this point, I don't know how we could build something that large ourselves, but that's, in any case, we're responding to a specific request. We did negotiate over the summer, and I think I mentioned it, I think the last time I was here, but I didn't when I just spoke. But part of our agreement was that there would be we call it a most favored nation clause in this agreement, but effectively if somebody's offered a better deal by this company, we would get it. So I feel comfortable based on, some input we received from our attorney as well on what other communities were getting for payments. And I don't know, again, Stephen Hamilton is here. I don't know if you get anything additional on that.
Question from that vein?
Yeah.
Nancy, you had also said that there was in the negotiation that there would be the ability to renegotiate each year, some portion of it?
There's an accelerator in
That's
there.
right, okay.
Yep, so you're 2% a year on the accelerator on both the pilot and the lease.
Thank you.
On the payment in lieu of taxes portion, excuse me, my voice is losing me today. The range of payment in lieu of taxes amounts per generating capacity, this payment is at the very high end of the range that we have known about in other communities in New Hampshire that they're already receiving. And I think it's important also that this property has a lot of physical challenges and a lot of development challenges, and it doesn't present itself as the most developable parcel or parcels of land in Claremont. So at the moment, the ability to generate income from the land is close to zero. This provides a benefit to the city to reduce taxes by bringing in a payment in lieu of taxes and the lease payments over a period of time where there may not be a lot of economic demand for it. But then it returns it to the city in a usable condition at the end of a period where there may be a greater demand for that land. And at that point, the city has the option of what it would want to do with it. So from that standpoint, from a valuation standpoint, and from the sufficiency of the payment in lieu of taxes standpoint, it seems like a very practical thing for the city to do with the land.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Hamilton? No? Okay. Any other questions from the public? Yes, Representative Stapleton.
Just one more. What is the plate generating capacity of this facility?
Yeah, as currently conceived, it is 10 megawatts AC, and that's what our interconnection request is currently. The electrical infrastructure in that area does have additional capacity. As Nancy mentioned, there is National Grid, there's Eversource, there's GMP, all right there. So again, if we were to want to expand it for some additional capacity for the city, the electrical infrastructure there would be able to handle it.
And again, it's something we talked about at the last meeting, and you mentioned it, that we have talked about negotiating a separate power purchase agreement for 3 to 4 megawatts for city use. So that is contemplated.
Just for clarification, if it's being contemplated, why isn't it part of the,
It's a separate negotiation.
okay, just, all right. Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Kent.
Every time you sit down, I'm going to ask you a question, Nancy. I'm sorry. Or either one of you. So if we were to negotiate in having that 3 to 4, you said it was watts, what does that look like for the average user of electricity in Claremont? Like, how does that affect their bill? Does it go down a lot? Is it just a little? What does that look like?
So this would be really just for city uses.
Just for the city? Okay.
Yeah, it gets very complicated if we talk about your individual residential houses. So city uses and potentially large industrial users in the city, we'd be able to work through something like that. If it's kind of everybody's house, Claremont would essentially have to start its own utility.
Aggregation.
So with that being said then, because obviously we can't do the whole city, but if we were to do just the city buildings and some of the large companies, what does that look like for a savings for the city? Because that does benefit the taxpayers.
Sure, yeah. I mean, typically, we are under, at least in certain parts of the year, what most folks are paying. I would need to look at your bills, frankly, to figure out what makes sense. One of the advantages with solar and actually any renewables is you're locking in a price. You want to make sure you lock in the lowest price, but that price isn't going to change. Whereas most cities, and I'm sure your city manager could attest to this, are buying energy in 3-year blocks, essentially 2 to 3 year blocks moving forward. So we're able to lock it in for 15, 20 plus years. So you have that certainty that your price isn't going to go up if, for example, the natural gas market collapses, which is 50% of our energy in New England.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? All right, so now it's time to vote. All those in favor of this motion that Councilor, who read the motion?
I did.
Councilor Kier read. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you for being here and for answering our questions. Thank you to the public for asking the questions.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.